Nuts and bolts with Tone here, guys. Welcome to my channel. Today I have a 2014 with turbo coolant lines leaking, and I'm going to show you how to replace those. We're going to be pulling the cab on this truck and doing it on the ground.
First up, you're going to disconnect your transmission cooler lines right there. Those ones that are coming down, you want to disconnect those and cap them off so they don't drip on your head. Now what I like to use is these. I got these from Matco. I'm not sure who makes them. I probably could read it, but nope. All right, Matco makes them, but they're metal. And that's for the big one. And then there's the other one's for the small one. In this kit right here, they're plastic and they just don't work right. The metal ones work way better. Next up is the parking brake. Now they make a special pair of pliers to disconnect this parking brake connection. And I actually just bought them. I'll put a link in the description to that. I always drill a hole and it's a pain in the butt to get it out. Next, you got to disconnect your transmission shift cable, and the bolts are really tight. They have a lot of Loctite on them.
You're going to take your battery out, disconnect your connectors here, recover your AC, disconnect your PCM connectors, take your cover off here, take your heater hoses and disconnect them. You're going to disconnect your upper radiator hose. You're going to disconnect your lower radiator hose from down there. It's got a clip and it pops out. You're going to take off this piece right here. Get to your AC connections here. You're going to have to disconnect those. You're going to disconnect your connector here. We're going to have to disconnect this fuse box. Take this cover off here. I'm going to take off this right here, this connection, that one right there, and that one. And go ahead and get this air box out of here. Get this disconnected. Your coolant needs to be drained. All right, you want to go ahead and mark your steering shaft, lock your steering wheel in place. I disconnected at both ends, so I don't have to deal with it right there. You're going to disconnect this hose right here from the radiator. It goes around the air box. Leave it connected here. Pop this hose off. 213s. You're going to pop this out. Disconnect your brake booster hose from here. Previously, I disconnected the vacuum pump, but on this one, I went ahead and disconnected it from there. You can take your air box out here and coolant reservoir. 2 13mm nuts here. Pop those off. You're going to roll your master over to the engine. Your lower hose, you need to make sure it's rolled over so it goes with the engine and doesn't get stuck on the radiator coming up. You only have to disconnect this top condenser hose, coolant condenser connection right here. And then that's going to get pulled back here with the engine. You need to disconnect this AC connection here and pull it over here. You're going to have to disconnect your grounds and your positives because it all has to go here. There's a big fat harness right here that has all the power and ground. You got to disconnect appropriate connectors and you want to get it all tucked into the engine like that. Got your heater hoses disconnected. You're going to disconnect, you're going to have 2 ground cables connected here, 1 ground cable connected back there. You got your PCM disconnected. You're going to have to pop all the clips off of the fender liner here, disconnect the appropriate connectors so everything rolls to the engine. And there is one more thing on the front of this. These 2 8mm bolts, you're going to have to take those out. They got me last time. This thing started going up and it was attached. So take those out.
So worst case scenario is when this happens. We had to cut a hole in the frame here in the body. The ears of the cage nut lift up and the nut spins and you have to cut it open and hold it with a wrench. So here's what they look like right here. These are the ears, and as you hammer on them with a gun, those ears loosen up, lift up, and then the nut spins. To get to the rear cab mounts, you have to take this off. As you can see right there, there's a pin right there, and there's also one on the other side. You have to push this up and twist to the left. It'll go up and over a little hump and then come back down. And then it's hooked on a clip. You just have to pry it off with a pry bar.
So what I found to be the best way to remove cab bolts is first you want to heat it up. 30 seconds with some MAP gas. If you have an inductive heater, you can use that. Basically what I do is I put the socket up there like this and I turn it and then I hold on to the socket while I turn my ratchet. Because if you don't hold on to the socket, then what happens is you're going to turn it, and then when you go to ratchet, your socket's going to go like this, and it's going to slowly open up the cage nut. So I have found that as long as I hold on to the socket like this, and I turn it, and then I bring my ratchet around like this, holding the socket, I have gotten all my cage nuts out doing that. That is my tip to removing cab mount bolts on a Ford. Okay, so a couple things you have to disconnect. On the driver's side fender well, you got to disconnect these two and release this from the fender. Here's your master cylinder leaned over. You got to disconnect your vacuum line and your differential breather, your ABS sensor on both sides, right there. You got to disconnect this sensor here. I almost forgot that. Both fog lights. Don't forget those two 8s right there. You didn't even have to disconnect these. I forgot. I took the boots off. I forgot the intercooler stays with the frame.
So you can see here we have all the harnesses and AC lines and everything tucked into the engine. Your lower hose is here. Oh yeah, the ABS connector, don't forget to disconnect that. It goes to the ABS pump. And then this ground right here goes to the frame. All of them, the diesels, everything have that ground. Here's what we had to do. We had to cut a hole in the body to access that nut. Yeah, that was fun.
So one thing I did was I went ahead and disconnected this pipe here while I had it up, while I had the body down, and I also disconnected this line here, this intercooler hose. I went ahead and just pulled it out just to make it easier to finagle the hose out and stuff like that. So we're going to start off on both sides by taking both of the charge air pipes off here. You're going to disconnect the hose clamps there, and you're going to have a connector here. So you got to disconnect these things. You just push in, and then you pull it out. It's one hand is not going to work. But anyways, I got to disconnect this one, and we're going to go ahead and pop that clip and take both of those out. And we're going to come over here and do the same thing on this side. You're going to have a hose here you got to disconnect. You can go ahead and drop. You see how I have everything tucked to be able to get the body off. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and take all of this and pull it down like that out of the way, because we're going to end up having to take the compressor off and the alternator, I believe. It's been a minute since I did one. And we're going to do the same thing. Go ahead and take both of these hoses off on this side.
So there you can see they both kind of come out together. Now all of these turbo coolant lines have clips on the fittings. You can just unbolt the fitting if you can get a wrench in there and spin the fitting off. But otherwise you have to remove these clips. They make little tools to disconnect the clips, but a lot of times they're plastic and they just don't work. Once you get one side of the clip off, because it has like two little ears, because it's like a C, you can kind of grab the other side and pull it with pliers. And if you're putting new fittings, you can just rip it off. And put a bucket underneath the truck at this point, because there's going to be a lot of coolant come out. I didn't have a bucket there, so I had quite the mess to clean up. This was recording at close up, and it just looks almost mesmerizing. It looks really cool. You're going to disconnect your turbo flange, your outlet flange. Now to get the turbo out, we need to remove the AC compressor, because the AC compressor sits right in front of the lines that we need to take out. That little bolt right to the right of that silver bolt, that's the bolt that bolts the lines to the block. We're going to be removing it. The coolant line is attached to a fitting on the back side of the turbo. And then there's the oiling line assembly. So you have the supply tube and the drain tube are all one, and they're all going to come out together. After you get the intercooler pipes off, you got to remove the main drive belt. It's going to be a 15 millimeter. You're just going to go right there to the tensioner and get that off. So I did this completely backwards. The AC belt, if you're going to replace it, just cut it off. But to get it off, the easiest way to do it is to go off the back of the crank. I pulled it off the compressor, which took forever. Just use a little pick and direct it towards the rear of the balancer and turn the balancer until it comes off on the backside. You've got to unclip the AC connector and then unclip the harness from the compressor. And then we got to take the alternator out as well. So there's the compressor right there, just 310s. And then you leave the lines attached. You're going to need a T45. I like the carbine tools. And you're going to come right here and just remove that bolt right there. You're going to need to remove the turbo mounting bolts, and those are T50s. So take all the bolts out of here and leave one. You're going to take this bolt out right here. Now this is the oil line that goes into the fitting. Here is the coolant line that goes into the fitting. There's no clip on this line here. So what we're going to do is have a pry bar handy. I'm going to go ahead and take this bolt off right here, and we're going to pull these lines away from the head and then pull the drain tube out of the oil pan and bring the oiling line and the coolant line out with the turbo. There's also a T45 right there holding the drain plug, the drain tube in. So here's what it looks like right here. I took it apart already. So this right here goes into your fitting in the head. Here's what goes into the block. And then you have a metal gasket here that goes on the turbo. And then here's your coolant fitting line right here. So your fitting line in the head looks like this. And it is right there. And there is a C-clip in there, but it doesn't hold the line in. So before you get started with the turbo, another thing that you can do is go to that side and go ahead and take your flange nuts off of that side as well. So the whole exhaust kind of drops a little more. This side, because of the O2 sensor, the flange is really close, so it doesn't want to come off of the studs of the turbo. The other thing that you want to do is go ahead and you may want to do this, you may not. I found it easier. Go ahead and just hop your 2 bolts out of your starter. One of them has a nut with a ground on it, the bottom one. So keep that in mind. Note that. You don't have to disconnect the electrical for the starter, but just take the bolts out, drop it down, and you can get to this bolt easier. And it's easier just to move the turbo out, and it will also aid in putting it back in, because we're going to have to slide it in that drain and then slide these lines in here. So I got to wait on parts on the other side because we don't have parts. So when you do this side over here, if you're only going to do the coolant tubes, you're going to be kind of screwed, because this oil line right here, the seal is inside this fitting, which is a filter. And only way to get that seal is with the filter and the whatever. As for the rest of the seals, you can get a kit that has the O-ring for the drain tube. It also comes with the metal gasket for the drain tube to the turbo, and even the gasket for the flange. It just doesn't have anything for the seal to the block. Without replacing the parts. So we'll roll onto this side. Now this side over here is a really important step. So you want to disconnect your electrical connector here. Now, here we are. Don't forget, we have the cab up. All right. This is very, very important. I don't want you to hurt yourself. So before you pop this plastic part of the B positive off here, make sure you disconnect your battery, because you don't want to hurt yourself disconnecting this. So we're gonna go ahead and take this off, and then we got to get the two bolts in the front, because we have to take this turbo out to get this turbo out. We have to take the alternator out to get the turbo out. You're going to have this bracket. This is for the intercooler pipes to attach to. This bracket goes through the stud that holds the alternator on and also clips onto the valve cover. So you're going to just 2 little 8 millis. That's going to be a 15 millimeter nut. And then you're going to have a 15 millimeter bolt at the bottom and a 7 millimeter for that stud. Get all that out and the alternator comes out. So this side, the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and take this bolt out right here. This bolts the coolant line and the oil line in. Then you're going to come over here and you're going to have a straight shot to the oil drain bolt right there. I'm going to take those out.
And before we do that, I need to take out this coolant line right here. So go ahead and take that clip out there. And take that clip out. For this side over here, they say you need to take the vacuum pump off. You don't need to if you lift the cab. So we're going to take the C-clips out and go ahead and pop the lines off and get this line off, this rubber line off, and then we'll work on the turbo. So here's how the turbo will look when you pull it out. You're going to have this line right here. Just be mindful of which way this points so you can have it in the right direction. Actually, well, I guess it won't really matter because you'll have it on the outside of the oil line, because the oil line is here bolted up with 2 bolts. So you're going to have that. Just make sure that you get this line with the clip. Make sure this line locks in. This line won't lock in. It doesn't work like that. There's a clip, but it doesn't actually lock. First time I did that, I spent an hour trying to figure out why the line wasn't working right. And it's because this is supposed to just pull out with the turbo. You can't get the clip off of this fitting.
Now, one thing to notate is the 2 fittings in the back of the head, those 2, they're the same fitting. So there's what the coolant tube looks like. So that's the one in the back of the head, and that's the one in the turbo. Now, the 2 in the turbo are the same. Both turbo fittings are the same on both sides. Then you come over to the block. Now, that fitting in the block is different than the ones in the back of the head. And it's 2 of those. So you have 2 for the block, 2 for the back of the heads, and 4 for the turbos.
All right, so when you order parts for this vehicle, this job, it's very confusing on everything. So let me show you. This is the fitting for the back of the head. All right, this is the one that goes here and there. That's the part number right there. It's gonna come like this. It's gonna have a little plastic thing in there. It's gonna be an O-ring, and that goes there. This one here, that number there, that one is the coolant fitting in the block that the inside coolant line goes to. So that's the one that goes right there on both sides. Same part number right there. Then you have this one. This fitting here, this goes on the turbo. There are 4 of these fittings, 2 on each turbo. So both of your coolant lines that connect to your turbo are going to connect through this fitting here. So 2 of these on the left turbo, 2 of these on the right turbo. And then all the lines are self-explanatory. You should be able to figure those out.
I can't stress this enough. This fitting right here in the side of the block right there, this is the oil supply filter for the turbo. The seal's in there also, but it's a filter. You would be a fool not to replace that fitting and filter and the turbo line assembly. The turbo line assemblies are common to clog up, starve the turbo, and then you have a failed turbo. The turbo fitting connection is 159 inch-pounds, and the turbo flange connection is 24 foot-pounds. You want to go ahead and clean up your gasket surface on your turbo and your line, your gasket surface for your line. Unless you're replacing the line, then you don't need to. Go ahead and bolt that up tight. Then you're going to take your coolant, your turbo coolant line, and you're going to apply pressure while pushing in and twisting. And then you should hear a click. And then you want to make sure that all 3 ears from the clip are visible, meaning that it's completely locked in. And I like to give it a little tug. So you're going to roll your line around and make sure that the hole lines up. If you use quality parts, the hole should line up no problem. You're going to put a new O-ring on your drain tube and lube it up. Lube up both of the lines that go into the fittings. Now this is important because it's a seal and it's easy to just lube it up. And then you're going to put a new gasket for your flange. You're going to slide your oil drain tube in the hole, and then you're going to rotate the turbo. You're going to put the 2 lines in the fittings there, and you're going to get the top bolt started for the flange. Then you want to start the bolt right there for the lines. Then you're going to put the bolt in for the drain, and then you're going to run these bolts most of the way in. You're going to run that bolt in and that bolt in most of the way. Then you're going to run your flange in. Make sure it's snug all the way around. If it is, torque through flange to 24 foot-pounds, and then go ahead and snug that bolt and snug the drain bolt. Then we still have to connect the flanges. You're going to kind of connect them both at the same time. Then you need to do your pressure hose for your wastegate on both sides. You're going to need to put your alternator back in over here. You're going to put the compressor in on the other side. And then we still have to do the fitting of the lines on from the turbo to the back of the head. You want to make sure that's clipped in.
So once you get both sides back together, don't forget to put your turbo hoses back in. Wrap them around the front. And when you get to this side, don't forget your compressor. Put your compressor in. And don't forget the bracket that goes here. And you got a line up here, right here, that goes on top of the bracket there. Don't forget that. And then we got to tuck everything back to the engine and get it ready to drop it down. So you can put this side together, charge air pipes, but don't put this side together. You got to get the belts on.
Now I'm going to try to put a link right here to a video that I did kind of showing this a little better in depth. So the easiest way to put these belts on is you put the belt behind the balancer. Then you put it on the AC compressor. Then you take at the top, you put a zip tie, and you zip tie the belt to the balancer the way that the belt would sit on the balancer. And then you try to put another one. Try to come over as far over as you can and put another one. And then as you rotate the engine, your belt will pull itself onto the balancer. You need to make sure you keep it on the AC compressor because as it's pulling itself onto the balancer, it will move off of the front of the compressor.
Put your starter on. So you got a bracket here for your trans cooler lines and a 10 mil nut. And then it's two 13 millimeter bolts with a stud sticking out. So don't forget to tighten that back up. So from here, once you've got your cab down, you've got AC lines here, you've got radiator hoses, you've got battery cables. You want to lay everything out how it goes. So this AC line over here goes over here. There's one that comes through the front. There's PCM connectors, there's ground cables, there's battery cables that come up through here. So the best advice that you can have with this is what you want to do is you want to work systematically and start low and work your way high. You don't want to just you just don't want to start connecting stuff, because then what happens is you'll connect things and there's stuff underneath that's not connected. Don't forget to do your 8s here and your latch that you have here. Over here you want to do your steering shaft first because it's underneath everything. So put your steering shaft in, and then you're going to lay your harnesses across here. Don't connect your master yet because remember you have the vent for the differential here. You have wheel speed sensor here. It's down in here. So you want to kind of start low, work your way high, because you'll forget wheel speed sensors. You'll forget stuff that routes underneath things. So in the front here, before you connect this stuff, you want to put your pipe on that goes down to your intercooler down here. But before you do that, you want to put your steering shaft on. So you want to do all of it systematically in order to try not to forget anything. Your battery cables, you want to make sure that you have all your battery cables laid out the way they need to go. They come up here and they lay through here. So you want to get all that laying in the right way. Your radiator hose, see I have my radiator hose behind this pipe here because I was just trying to keep it in the engine bay while I was dropping the engine. So got your heater hoses back there. You got your connectors that go along here. I have no fender well right now because we have to weld up that piece of metal down there. So you just want to make sure that you systematically put this back together.
So for your degas bottle hose and your lower radiator hose, you want to take a little bit of lubrication and wipe it around in that O-ring there. You could also wipe it around that portion right there. Basically, you just want it to be lubed up when you put the hose on so it doesn't tear the O-ring, because then you'll have a leak and you'll have to replace the hose.
So when you're all done, you're going to recover your AC or vacuum down your AC. I would recommend you change your Schrader valves before you charge it up, because I normally do, and I didn't on this one because I was in a hurry. Guy needs to leave to go to Utah, and I charge it up and the low side Schrader's puking. So now I have to wait for it to vacuum down, charge back up. So lost a bunch of time. Don't forget the ABS connector down there. I forgot to tell you that yesterday on this side here. Use a vacuum refiller for your coolant, and you should be good to go. I got this one all running. Just need to double check for oil leaks. And that is how you remove a cab on an F-150 and replace the turbo coolant line. Now, I strongly recommend that you replace the oil line assemblies and the oil filters. It's super common. You don't want to take this apart, take the turbos off, and then have to turn around and have seized up turbos because of oil, because that's really hard for a customer to swallow when it was apart and now the turbos are seized. So kind of sucks. You might lose a customer that way. So just do them the justice, sell them the job right in the first place. Thanks for watching the video. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell. You get notified of all my future content, which you definitely don't want to miss. Thanks for watching. See you next time.